Greetings, everyone, and welcome back after a long summer break. We are back with the UK Beef webinar series, and we appreciate everyone joining us tonight. It looks like we have a pretty good crowd. Kind of how we do this is we will start off with the different specialists that we have on board tonight. We'll give a little short kind of a hot topic update for their particular area. And then we have a couple of questions that came in today via email. We'll get those answered, and then we'll open it up for any questions or discussions you guys have. If y'all don't have anything, then we'll just babble on for a little bit longer and then let you guys go to bed for the night. So we will start off, as I said, with a little bit of a hot topic area, and have Dr. Van Valen is first on my little list there, Katie. So if you don't mind, I'll let you get us started with an hot topic, if you would.
All right. I'm Dr. Katie Van Valen, and my area is nutrition. And so thing I've been getting a lot of questions on, and we'll probably touch on this a little bit more later on with more of a specific question, really comes down to how we're going to feed these cows this winter with some of the hay supplies that we have. Maybe some of our hay quality isn't what we thought it might be. And if you've been to the feed store recently, you've probably experienced some sticker shock. And so how are we gonna make this happen? And so one of the first things I tell people, if you don't regularly test your hay, this is the year to do it, because we can actually know what's in that hay or what's not in it, right? A lot of times folks tell me, well, I know it's not going to be any good, so I'm not going to waste the time or money to test it. But this is a year where we can really strategically try to supplement those cows and not over supplement or supplement with something that maybe is going to provide a little more protein than we need to meet that energy requirement. We can try to tailor these rations to what these cows need so that we can meet their nutrient requirements without over supplementation, because this is probably not a year where we can really afford to do that too much. But at the same time, we've got to make sure we keep them fed and in good body condition scores so that they're going to breed back for us and continue to raise a calf for us. So that is kind of my hot topic is preparing for winter feeding. This is probably not the year to do what you've always done. If you've always just fed a mix of corn gluten feed and soy hulls, for example, might be a year to consider something like dried distillers grains, or looking at some other options to meet those nutrient requirements just based on where some of these feed prices are right now. So start now if you haven't already, and try to figure out exactly what the cows are going to need and what your forages are going to be able to provide. And then we can fill in the gap with supplementation as we need to.
Thank you, Katie. I've got a question for you. So if somebody does want to have their hay tested, what's kind of the process for getting that done?
Yeah, I would recommend reaching out to your local county extension office, because most of our county offices, our county agents have a hay testing probe. And they may even come out and help you get those samples collected and help you get them sent off. But at the very least, most of our offices have a hay probe that you can borrow. And Dr. Chris Teutsch has a really nice video on collecting a hay sample and walking through that whole process. And that can be found on the UK Forages YouTube page. So I always kind of send folks that direction. If you haven't done it in the past, or maybe it's been a while since you've done it, he goes through a lot of the details and specifics there in terms of how many cores to get per lot and all of that kind of thing. But you can start with your county office, because a lot of our agents will even come out to your farm and help you get those samples collected. I know some of our counties have programs where they offer hay testing for free. So again, I encourage you to reach out locally and see what resources are available for you.
And Katie, I'll put a link to Chris's YouTube in just a moment.
Perfect.
Or you can just Google UK or KY Forages YouTube, and you'll get to that channel and find that. But I'll put it in the chat box in just a minute.
All right, great, Ray. That provides a perfect segue. We have Dr. Ray Smith with us, one of our forage specialists. And so, Ray, I'll just turn it over to you and let you give us a hot topic if you would, please.
Great. Well, most folks have had frost, and many have had most everyone's had frost, and a number of you have had a freeze already. So I want to mention being careful in the next few days, particularly if it's your first frost or freeze, with fields that have Johnson grass. So Johnson grass, when it's frosted, particularly if it's leafy material or younger shoots, will produce cyanide, or sometimes we call that prussic acid. So prussic acid poisoning. So the real thing to watch for is making sure that material has dried before you start grazing. Sometimes we say 3 days after frost, sometimes we say a week, but the safest thing is once the material has dried, then the cyanide has dissipated, and then the risk is low. Talked to county agent Dave Appleman from Bracken County today, and there's a suspected case. I think it was actually just first thing this morning. And he also tested some sorghum. So anything in the sorghum family also can have a potential for prussic acid poisoning or cyanide poisoning. And it did have a fairly high level of cyanide using the test strips. So just don't not use those fields. We all need forage. Just make sure that leafy material is dried before turning the animals into those fields.
All right, great. Appreciate it, Ray. I actually have a question for you too. I know that across the state, there's a lot of variation in how much moisture we've got here in late summer and all. And here at my house in southern Scott County, we are extremely dry, and it looks like that the folks with pasture around here, it's going to seriously impact their ability to stockpile fescue. What's your thoughts on that? Recommendations in terms of folks trying to do some stockpiling?
So if you were able to get some growth, maybe during August and early September, I was in the field today with some county agents, and the fescue was about yay tall, about a foot tall. It was dried up and curled up. But that material, once we get some rain, will fill back out and be useful. We'll get a little more growth, again, assuming that we get some rain. But we're probably going to have about half the stockpiled growth for winter grazing that we would have in a normal year. That's assuming that we get some rain in the next couple of weeks. So make sure, and as Katie talked about with feeding and with your hay supply, don't just say, well, I grazed stockpiled fescue for 2 months last year. Don't assume you'll get that much off of it. Make sure you look out there and determine how much you have in comparison to past years. And if you need to buy a little more hay, then go ahead and do that. As Katie talked about, hay quality is probably going to be down, whether it's your farm or you're buying it. Hay supplies are tight now. The prices are going up, and they're not just going up in Kentucky, they're going up around the country. So we won't be able to just bring hay in here from some of the Midwestern or Western states that we've been able to sometime. Texas right now, a round bale of grass hay is going for $100 a roll. So we're kind of all in the same boat, meaning that be prepared yourself. Don't just hope for the best.
I'm afraid I might have been the one that jinked us on that, Ray. Earlier this summer, I wrote a Cow Country News article, and actually, I think I talked about this when we did the last hot topics, was that we had been kind of spoiled with 10 years of good rain, and so I may have jinxed us. Sorry about that.
Okay, we'll forgive you this time.
All right.
I'm not going to forgive him. Forget that.
You never do. You never do.
I
All
never
right,
do.
Dr. Arnold, that put you on the chopping block.
Well, wait a minute.
So
Ray, are you going to talk about nitrates at all? The nitrate testing?
You want to mention that, Michelle?
Doesn't matter. It's one of the concerns, I guess, that I've heard lately. Just because
go ahead and mention that. go ahead and mention that. And then many of the county agents do have the nitrate test strip. So go ahead and
Right, we've
mention the
been-
issue.
Trying to point everyone towards the extension offices, hoping that they had current, because those nitrate test kits do expire. So hopefully we've got some good ones, out there, and you all can supplement them as necessary. But same with prussic acid concerns. We've got nitrate concerns too with drought, with Darrh's drought that he's caused. So we've got to be testing the hay. Remember that nitrates don't go away in the hay. So be a good idea to add that test if you don't normally do it, or at least do a field test. Had some questions. Fella was gonna, he was getting ready to wet wrap some Sudan sorghum and was concerned, concerns about mostly about nitrates. And of course, some of the nitrates will be reduced with ensiling, but not completely. So, those are times that definitely testing is worthwhile. And again, these field tests are nice to give you an indication, but if it tells you there's something wrong, you should go ahead and do more sampling and send it off for more quantitative information. Sorry, I should have my video on. I cut it off there for a minute.
So Michelle, if someone sends in hay, were you thinking maybe they ask for a nitrate test as well, particularly if it's a warm season forage? Or
I think it's a good idea. I remember a presentation I saw from University of Georgia, and I can't remember her name, but she did her work at Kentucky. But
Yes.
she said routinely in Georgia, they run nitrates on the hay. So I think in this case, it's probably a good idea if you have the the sorghums or Sudan sorghum.
And I
All right.
should add to my comment with the prussic acid or cyanide. We see very low levels or no levels in hay or properly in solid silage. So fortunately, you don't have to worry if you put up a field that you knew had a lot of Johnson grass in it, since it's going to be completely dry by the time you hay it, or the ensiling will detoxify that cyanide. So fortunately, you're safe that way. But as Michelle said, it's going to stay in the hay, and it's going to stay somewhat in this silage, whether it's chopped silage or round bale silage.
All right, great. I didn't properly get to introduce you, Dr. Arnold. So Dr. Michelle Arnold, if you guys don't know, is our extension veterinarian out at the diagnostic lab. And Michelle, did you have another hot topic for us or some information on what's been coming in out at the lab?
Well, of course, it's October, so it's it's anaplasmosis time in Kentucky. Most of the cases we get right now are adult cattle that have died suddenly or died quickly, and it's due to anaplasmosis. This year we've seen more cases around central Kentucky. It seems to have moved down around in Georgetown area, Stamping Ground. So it's moving closer to Lexington than we've seen it in previous years, which is the way this disease moves. It kind of goes into an area, causes quite a bit of death loss as it enters an area. And then as all the animals become exposed to it, then you get less and less. But so we've had quite a few cases of anaplasm. We've got a really nice test now at the diagnostic lab for it, which is a PCR test, which everybody knows about PCR tests now that we've been through COVID. But it detects antigens, so it's very accurate and good at diagnosing a current case. So lots of these cattle that come in are really rotten by the time we get them, just because of the weather. But we're able to still do the testing, so that makes it nice that it doesn't really matter how rotten it is. Those PCR tests work really well. The other thing we were concerned about earlier in the season was tulariosis which is similar to anaplasma, and it's carried by that tick, the Asian longhorn tick. That has sort of played out. I think we saw a couple of cases early on, and that may be the extent of it for this year. But any of these vector-borne diseases, they typically take a few years to cook. It takes a while to build up a certain amount of vectors that actually that are carrying the disease and can spread it. So I don't think it's over, but maybe for this year, not as much of a concern. But we know we had 2 cases in Kentucky that I'm aware of. And so next year we'll watch for it. We'll watch for it again. It's a little different in that and with anaplasmosis, we're generally in the fall when we have disease, but with this other disease, tulariosis, which looks exactly like anaplasma, it can be early spring as well. So kind of adds a little bit of a little difference between the diseases. And that's probably all that's really rocking right now in my world.
Right. Thank you very much. All right, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Les Anderson, our repro phys guy, is next up on the list. So what do we have going on, Dr. Anderson?
Well, it's that transition time for both fall and spring calving. We need to make sure that we get our cows preg checked from the spring. We had a hot, dry, nasty breeding season, and with really early heat. And my guess is we're going to be seeing, a little bit more open rate due to the additional heat stress. Recall, for any of you that have sat in master cattlemen or heard me talk about heat stress, your conception rate will drop up to 40% when cows are heat stressed. And so we need to make sure that we get your cows preg checked this year. It's going to save you opportunity to save you a lot of money, particularly Dr. Van Valen and Kevin with the feed costs the way they're going to be this year. So make sure you contact your herd veterinarian or get some blood samples done and get these cows preg checked. For your fall calving cows, we're getting about a month away from beginning the breeding season, so you need to start planning. I highly recommend that you synchronize estrus in your cows, whether that's for natural service or for AI. We have some really good protocols for that. But the easiest and probably cheapest way is just feed MGA for 7 days right before you turn the bull out. There are 0 negative effects and a ton of positive effects on pregnancy rate and shifting the calving season, which will greatly benefit you. Also, since we're getting close to the fall breeding season, now's the time to get your heifer work done. So get a hold of your herd veterinarian and get your heifers vaccinated. And Dr. Arnold can fill in what you need to vaccinate for, but also get the pelvic areas done in them. Just get a general well-being done. Make sure their feet and legs are in good shape and they're everything that you need them to be a replacement heifer. Remember, the main goal we have with our heifers is to get them bred early in the breeding season. And we would really like for them to calve easy, right, Dr. Bullock? And so I would recommend AI to a proven calving ease direct sire. But that's about all that's going on in repro right now. Happy to answer any questions when the time comes.
All right, just to prove to you that I listen to you when you teach the students in the class that we teach. So MGA, you talked about the benefits of it synchronizing the females, but it also has that additional benefit, right, of those that aren't quite ready to start cycling, of getting them kick-started.
Yeah, that is actually 90% of the benefit of MGA is those late calving cows and 2-year-olds that haven't initiated estrus yet. It goes ahead and stimulates them to come into heat and to come into heat early. And so let's say, we're going to use a fall calving example here. So let's say you had a cow calve today and you're planning on breeding around December the 1st. Well, that gives you about 50 days. The average postpartum length, so postpartum interval length is the number of days from when they calve till they start, when they have normal cycles. That's typically between 60 and 70 days for mature commercial crossbred beef cows. And so that cow is going to need a little bit of help. And MGA is or a cedar device. They're the perfect solution. Just feed them the MGA 7 days before you turn the bull out. There's MGA products available from nearly every feed supplier. I know Dr. Johns in particular has worked up a product there with Berkman that's works very well. But that's the main benefit, Dr. Bullock, is that you stimulate those anestrus cows to begin to cycle. And what you end up in your whole herd, you end up with more opportunities for those cows to get pregnant early. And for the most part, it works. It's, it's not foolproof, but it's pretty doggone close.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Next up,
Les,
we have, go
wait a
ahead,
minute.
Michelle.
I
You're
had a
good.
question for Les. So Les, I've heard a lot of producers talk about having breeding problems due to the heat. How long does that effect last? I mean, at what point can you say that the heat stress is probably abated?
That's a great question. And I don't have a great answer to it because I've seen cows as late as early November showing signs of heat stress when they were grazing endophyte infected fescue, and we happened to have a abnormally warm early November day. Typically it subsides somewhere here in that first to the middle of October. But I have seen it last for quite a while. And the issue is consumption of the endophyte. And so, Ray, if we can talk them into a warm season annual, or a cereal grain, or some sort of planning to get your cows off of endophyte infected fescue for at least July and August, Michelle, that really helps our pregnancy rates. And I know you guys know, that I'm on a lot of farms, and the folks that have the warm season annuals or any sort of forage without endophyte, they don't have heat stress issues like everybody else. Their cows don't. And if David, I don't know if David Appleman's on or Bart's on, but that's one of the best examples that I know is that Bart Hamilton there in Bracken County has got low endophyte alternatives for his cows during the heat stress periods, and he's really seen a reduction in heat stress issues. So it truly helps to have an alternative to fescue in July and August. And maybe even we could, even in dry years, if we weren't on our fescue pastures, then Dr. Smith, maybe we could stockpile some of that and graze it in November and December when it's a little bit more beneficial to our cows.
A good point, Les. And just reminding people, or if you haven't heard this yet, fescue can be fairly high in the toxins during the fall, but after a couple of hard freezes, typically about mid-December, then those toxins have dissipated. So if you've seen any fescue type issues in the fall of the year, for example, if you're fall calving and you're having some issues breeding, keep those animals off until about mid-December, a couple of hard freezes.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. Next up, we have Kevin Laurent, one of our beef specialists down at Princeton. Kevin, what do you have for us this evening?
Well, I'm going to try to share my screen, so bear with me here. Can Can we see it now?
I see it.
Okay, y'all see it? Okay. All right. We got I kind of updated these. It's weaning time. And so we having to make our marketing decisions, you know, we're going to try to precondition and background these calves. These slides I'm going to show you is something I made myself go ahead and update Kenny. These are from Kenny Burdine. I steal all my best stuff from Dr. Burdine. But anyway, I've been kind of maintaining this slide set since he gave them to me years ago, and decided to go ahead and update this. And what this shows is kind of takes a historical view of where our markets at different times of the year. So, you know, what's the market offering us in terms of putting some added weight on these calves? So I'll just walk you through this. So let's say we've got a 530-pound calf in October, and then we plan to precondition it and sell it in December at 650 pounds. So we're going to put 120 pounds on that calf in 60 days. Over this time period here, over these 14 years, the market has averaged rewarding us $111. So the average price of that 5-weight versus the average price of this 6-weight, that difference has been $111 over this time period, right?
Hey,
So,
Kevin, sorry.
yeah.
I'm not seeing your screen, and some others have commented they're not. So I'm
Okay,
not sure
so
what.
Try sharing it again, Kevin, because right as you were trying to share, I realized you weren't a co-host and I made you a co-host. So try sharing it again. It might work.
So I'm gonna back out here.
Yeah, I wasn't seeing it either.
Share screen. Where we go? Here we go.
Now remember, you have to hit the second button on share too.
Is that it? How about now?
Nope.
Oh, good Lord. There we go. Now we got the right button. There we go.
Now we're talking.
I tell you. All right. So let me see if we can start this off. So what we're trying to show you here is the difference in value of this 5-weight versus this 6-weight in December, October versus December, over this 14-year period from 2008 to 2022, right? That average has been $111 difference in value, right? So to put 120 pounds on, we'd have to do it for less than $111 to make any money. So on a cents per pound, that'd be 93 cents per pound. So that means our feeding program needs to be less than that, right? So right now, $300 feed, that's a little dicey, right? If you look at that time period, if you take this same 6-weight calf, but you bring him over to a 7-weight in February, put another 120 pounds on him, that next 120 pounds, it's a little easier to do. So you've got a little more forgiveness here, a little more room to work here now. Just kind of keep this 93 and this 114 in mind. So what I thought, well, this is 14 years. Let's see what it looks like close by. And this graph may, or this chart may kind of show you, spreadsheet may show you where we're getting with these numbers. So just in the last 2 years, in 2020 and 2021, that October 5-weight has been, you know, in 2020 average of what, $1.38 a pound, $7.30 a head roughly. And in December, you see what its value is, February, what its value is at this weight, right? So these are real numbers. This is what the market was given for these cattle. This is the historical numbers, right? So over here, this is the gross margin we have to work with, right? So that December, October, December, we had to do it for less than $136 to make any money. We had to do it here from December to February for less than 142. Now, if you look what the last 2 years, let's calculate that on out. So that $137 gross margin, that's $1.14 per pound. Okay, so that's a little more doable. At least the last 2 years, it looks like, you know, and if you look at PVAP data, this will back that up. We had some nice returns, especially last fall, to folks who preconditioned and sold in December and in February. Current prices, let's just say our current prices hold. our current prices, this even looks a little more attractive. Now, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, with prices. But if you look at, the last 2 years, taking that 650 weight calf to a 770, see these numbers are even more attractive, right? And then currently, if the current prices hold up, and the prices I use here just for reference point was about $1.70 on a 5 weight and $1.60 on that heavy 7. And that's what gives you that $1.27. Had a phone call today from a producer saying, hey, I'm figuring if my calves are gaining 2 pounds a day, he's weaned them. He said, if they're gaining 2 pounds a day based on what I'm feeding, I feel like I'm doing 83 cents, okay, in feed costs. Now, that wasn't his total cost. So he still would have to, sharpen his pencil and make sure he's got all his costs involved. But feed costs will be the lion's share of that. And 83 cents, in fact, when I updated these numbers, I sent that to him, thinking this might give him a little more to look at. Now, let's take it one step further. Again, another good tool that I've used from Dr. Burdine here is his backgrounding decision. Let's just see, let's run one little quick scenario here. Let's take that 530-pound calf and let's make him, let's buy him or sell him to ourselves. We're a cow calf producer. We're going to sell that calf to ourselves, if you will, or to our preconditioning program. And we're going to take this calf all the way to February, right? So at $1.70 in value, okay, and we're going to feed him about 13 pounds on the average for that 120-day period. We're going to feed him on the average about 13 pounds of concentrate that's valued at $300 a ton. Now, I called around some of my buddies on this end of the state, and they're getting feed in that 300 range. That may or may not be what you're experiencing. So again, got to sharpen your pencil. But this feeding program here with decent hay should give us about a 2 1/4. It actually on paper would give us more than 2 1/4, but I'm gonna say we're gonna net at least 2 1/4 average daily gain. And if our 6 weight prices hold, which of course our load lot 1 owner lots are beating this 160 right now. But if this holds, we've got some potential for a return down here. Now, all of this said, if you can do this and then tap into one of our preconditioned programs, whether it's CPH, whether it's Western Kentucky, our red tag that we have at the Ledbetter yard, the bluegrass yards have a bluegrass verified. Most of these yards have some kind of preconditioned program. You can marry this feeding program and this management to a marketing program. I think this, we've got some decent chances for some returns here. So I guess bottom line is, I know feed prices are high, but our value gain is pretty good right now. They're not sliding these big cattle too hard. And I think there's some opportunity here, especially if you got good cattle that are ready to go. They're implanted and all castrated. Everything's ready to go at weaning, not something that you got to do a bunch of doctoring on at weaning time, but something that's ready to hit the ground running on the farm. I think there's some potential to still have some returns this fall, even given these high feed prices. So that's about all I got there on that part.
Great. The bearer of good news. So now we'll bring in Kenny and let him probably share some bad news for us. I don't know what Kenny's got to say. I'm anxious to hear now that you got everybody perked up, Kevin. So next up on the list is Dr. Kenny Burdine, our ag economist, marketing specialist. So Dr. Bird, are you still sharing your screen, Kevin, or did you stop? No, I think you stopped. So if you would, Kenny, I'm gonna turn it over to you, buddy.
Yep, thank you, Dr. Bullock. I'll just share a few thoughts, but I don't know, it seems like I blinked my eyes and it went from summer to fall pretty quick. And fall and cattle markets always have had a strange relationship, and that's kind of where we are right now. It's been compounded by the dry weather, I think, especially in this part of the country, that all of a sudden we've had to really fully deal with the impact of these high feed prices. Grass was kind of buffering the feeder market from that for a while, but we're there now. What drives the value of these calves this time of year is really ultimately it's their value when they're finished, right? But I always kind of look at the spring feeder cattle futures board and what I can do on a program kind of like what Kevin just described and what I can pay for those calves, and that gets you pretty close oftentimes to what they're going to be worth. But back in August, the spring feeder cattle board, so think like April 2023, feeder cattle futures were in the $1.90s. We're in the 190s, and now they're in the 170s. So we've taken about 15 cents a pound off the spring board. That comes directly off these calf values. So we've shaved 15, 20 cents off our 4 and 5 weight steer prices the last 6-8 weeks. And that's just where we are. I really think had it not been for that break in the spring board, we actually would have seen virtually no fall price decline on calves this year, but that's where we are. But, the thing that really strikes me about a year like this, and I've never been one to say, is it a good year or a bad year to manage price risk? But, if you've not looked at livestock risk protection insurance, give it a look. I mean, they're making it so much more attractive. It's more heavily subsidized than it's ever been. It's easier to get. There's more flexibility. And, a year like this is the kind of year that would have worked really well. There was some opportunities to lock in some prices back in the summer, that frankly are gone now. And I'm not saying we saw it at the time coming. I'm just saying risk management's got to be part of your program year in, year out. The only other thing I would say, I was kind of thinking about what both Katie and Ray had said, and forage growth and weather are variable across the state. I know what it is where I run cattle, and it's gotten dry. It's the last 6-8 weeks gotten really dry. So, we were heavily dependent on stockpile grass, and we're really worried about stockpiling anything this year. I was around for the 2007-2008 year when we had the major hay scramble. I don't know if it'll be that bad this year or not, but I guess I would say this, one of the differences this year versus that time period is we had cheaper alternatives. If my memory serves me correct, and I don't know if it does, but although hay was expensive, I think we could buy soy hulls at the time for $120, $140 a ton. And that's sure not the case this year. So there's just not near as many alternatives. But, one thing we learned that year was a lot of folks didn't start trying to source hay until they were virtually out. So what I'm saying is that hay prices do not get any better as we move through winter. So I think the earlier you look for options, the better. And then the other thing, both Ray and, Katie talked about, utilizing pasture, and she talked about utilizing alternative feeds. But by all means, don't waste the hay you've got. Do the little things. If you don't use hay feeder, typically they'll pay for themselves pretty quickly. Simple ring feeder makes a big difference versus nothing. If you got to feed hay without a ring, turn it on its side if you can. The other thing is, on the storage end, I mean, if you've got a big, nice hay barn to store hay in, fantastic. But even if you don't, there's a lot of inexpensive ways to limit hay storage loss. Just get it off the ground somehow, gravel pad, get it on poles, cover it with tarp, do what you can. Hay feeding days are going to be more expensive this winter by probably 50% compared to last year, if I had to give you kind of a ballpark number. So, you want to stretch it as long as you possibly can. So just, don't waste what forage you got, whether it be forage you could graze this fall or forage you feed and store for them this winter. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Kenny. You at least you weren't brutal, I guess. I guess we've had rosier reports, but we've certainly had worse ones. So I appreciate that. If anybody has any more specific questions for any of the folks that have spoken so far, please type them in your chat, or just a general question, and we'll see who we think needs to field it. But if you have any of those, just go ahead and type that into the chat. I'm going to share a little bit. I guess I didn't properly introduce myself. I'm Darrh Bullock. I'm one of the beef specialists here in Lexington, pretty much focus on the genetic side of things. And I'm going to share my screen. I've been working on a little project this summer on updating the breed tables that you guys have probably seen me share before. Let me see. There we go. And so hopefully that's up for you guys. So this is, don't pay too much attention to this, because what I did was I went back in my archives and I dug up the original slide that I put together. Then this is the data from the Meat Animal Research Center that shows how the different breeds compare for a few traits. And I thought it was pretty interesting how everything panned out. They had Angus and Hereford grouped together, but as you can see, at this particular time, and this is from 1988. This was Dr. Larry Cundiff at the Meat Animal Research Center initially put this together to give producers kind of an idea with this X's or pluses sort of a table, how the breeds compared. And as you can see, our British breeds were very moderate in terms of their growth and mature size, very moderate in terms of their milking ability, and fairly fat from a lean to fat ratio. The fewer X's or pluses means that they tended to be fatter compared to the amount of leanness they had. We could look at our continentals that were milk and meat, like our Gelbvieh and our Simmental. Extreme growth, particularly the Simmental, one of the largest, heaviest, highest growth, heaviest mature weight breeds that we had. Fairly lean and very high milk production on these breeds. And then our Charolais Limousine, some of our work meat continental type breeds tended to have a lot of growth and mature size, very, very lean and very little milk production. Well, that was then, because things have changed considerably to now. This is how the breeds compare now. And the biggest one that jumps out to me is the change in the Angus breed, from going to being one of the smallest breeds that we had here in the country to now they are the largest breed that we have. I have these ranked based on yearling weights, okay? And so Angus now has the highest yearling weight of any breed, based on research here at the Meat Animal Research Center. Now, this is not based on the selective sires that they've used there. That was all accounted for. In other words, the sires were ranked within the particular breed that they came from and adjusted so that this is actually comparing apples to apples. And so you can kind of see, just to get a feel for how they rank on yearling weight. But what comes along with that growth, though, is a lot more mature size as well. And we have to remember, if beef producers, even though Angus and most of the breeds have gotten frame size more under control, we don't feed frame size. I think Dr. Van Valen will vouch for this. We feed mature weight. And so those heavier breeds, those heavier cows, even though they might be moderately height, if they're weighing 15, 16, 1700 pounds, they're eating a lot of groceries. And so to pay for themselves, they better be producing a really big calf. The other big move that some of these breeds have made is on the milk side. So you can see now Angus is a heavier milking breed than Simmental. It was exactly the opposite of this back 30 years ago. But now Angus has put a lot more milk in their cattle, and Simmental is actually moderated, come down some in the amount of milk that they have in their cattle. Again, this is neither a plus or a minus as far as I'm concerned. It really depends on your management system. If you have somewhat restricted nutrition and you have extremely large, extremely heavy milking cattle, then I'm going to suggest you're probably going to have a difficult time keeping the body condition on those cattle and getting them pregnant. And I'm going to vouch for Dr. Anderson on this. In terms of money making, that's probably the most important thing that we do, is get our cows pregnant each and every year to be on that a year or shorter calving cycle in order to pay for themselves. You can take a little bit of time. I'm going to try and get this published and out as a fact sheet here shortly that has all the breeds that they've tested there at the Meat Animal Research Center, and show some of these comparisons. But that's at least a quick look at what's going on in the updated breed comparison tables anyway. So I'm going to unshare. Again, if you guys have any questions, please type them in the chat room and we'll get to them. We have, did you have something, Dr. Anderson? Yep.
Yeah, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Gelbvieh, I thought that was a very interesting change that Gelbvieh has made, where it looks like they're the lightest mature weight up there. And yet their milk is still at 4. Just thinking about cow efficiency and so forth, with that greatly reduced mature weight, or what it looks to be a greatly reduced mature weight, well, that I mean, that milk is certainly still going to have some additional nutrient requirements, but I would say that's blunted quite a bit by that just the reduced mature weight or size. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, I know we've got the Angus there at 4 and 4, and and really they're the worst combination up there.
That's an excellent point, Les. Is I thought that Gelby showed up really well too in that regard, because that's really kind of what we want them to do, right? Grow like crazy until yearling weight, or even because you can see that the Gelby also carried that weight all the way through to the carcass as well. So if you're retaining ownership, that carcass weight is a big driver in profitability on that end. So they were able to do that at the same time. The replacement females are still, very moderate. And so therefore your feed bill on keeping those cows around, to me, that I thought that reflected quite well on in that regard for Gelby. There were a couple of breeds that kind of surprised me. I'll tell you this too. I've put a lot of kind of thought into and literature searching and all in terms of the impact of milk and mature weight. And I've about convinced myself that I used to think that milk was the real problem. I've changed my opinion. I think that our biggest problem right now is mature weight on our cattle. I think that's where we've really gone too far. They're too big. They're, like I said, everybody thinks because we got frame size under control that we've solved the problem. That doesn't solve the problem, because we feed the weight, and we've got a bunch of weight on these cattle, and we need to start shedding some of those pounds.
Not feeding frame, you're feeding mass.
Exactly. And so, yeah, and it's kind of funny because I've always loved those really deep bodied, really thick made sort of cows and all. I might like them to look at, but when you start putting this high price feed in them, it makes you rethink some of that a little bit. It doesn't look quite as attractive to me as it used to. All right, good
I thought
discussion.
also really changed a ton. I mean, you remember we used to think about those great big old limousine cows, the 1,800, 1,900 pound Lemmy Cross cows that were here for, 10 to 15 years, about 20 years ago, right? But they've really done a heck of a job controlling their mature weight as well.
Right. Absolutely. Now the thing that impresses you also, that just to look at this chart, I think, Les, is when you look at what Angus and Red Angus have done from a growth standpoint, from going from little tiny puds in the 60s to, Angus being the largest growth breed today. They did that, and you would have thought that birth weight would have crept up and therefore caused more calving difficulty over that time period, but they actually have been able to maintain relatively good birth weights at the same time of putting that additional growth on there. So that's kudos to those breeders in being able to get that done.
Absolutely.
And of course the tools, the EPDs and all that we have available to us is what has made that possible. I mean, being able to select for multiple traits at the same time. All right, I want to get to a couple of questions that we got. The first one, Dr. Arnold, I know you told me you weren't an entomologist by training, and I know, but a lot of folks kind of put the internal and external parasites in the health category. So you're the closest thing we've got to an entomologist. How about that?
That's pretty sad.
So somebody was asking about having more flies, both horn and face flies, later in the year than they remember having previously. Do you have some comments about that?
Well, this time of year, probably whatever they're using for fly control has pretty well played out. That's what we usually run into when we get into late October, mid-October. especially if they were using fly tags. They have done their due and run out, so we're not getting much control. And then I think the later we get into the year and the days get shorter, producers kind of stop thinking about fly control and going out and recharging the back rubbers and things that would need to be done to get us through to the end of the season. So I don't think it's any different than it has been in previous years. It just plays out this way. I know when Dr. Townsend, when Lee Townsend was the extension entomologist, he would always say, if you're doing the additives, if you're using like the insect growth regulators, he always said, start those in your mineral or feed, whichever way you do it, 30 days before fly season and continue till 30 days after fly season. And he would always say, at least go to November 1 with those products. So we should be getting towards the end. And again, it's best because of resistance issues not to leave those fly tags in. If you are running them through the chute, try to cut those things out, because that little bit left over can definitely cause some resistance to the chemical. So we want to try to reduce that as much as possible.
Okay, excellent point. I think that particularly that resistance issue, the insects have that ability to really get resistant pretty quick on folks, and we need to pay attention to the details when it comes to getting those old fly tags out and all.
And we've still got, remember it's called ENT 11 fact sheet, which is insect control in beef cattle. It's still available. I think the latest one out is 2020. I don't think there was one put out after that, but still the information is good, and it's still very applicable and goes through all the different types, excuse me, of fly control and dust bags and premise sprays, etc. So it's still a really good resource.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, our next question that we have, and I think this one's for Katie and Kevin, if you guys can handle this one. It's can a 1,200 to 1,350 pound cow with a body condition score of about a 4.5 to 5 maintain or gain weight on a diet of wheat straw supplemented with distiller's grain? Any other ideas one might use to extend limited hay supplies in Western Kentucky for cows calving in mid-February?
Dr. Bullock, can I share my screen real quick?
Absolutely.
All right, so hopefully y'all can see this. I threw this together real quick after we got that question in. And so these are some numbers I like to keep in the back of my head when I am looking at hay test results. These are numbers I like to give to producers and our agents to just kind of think about. And these are our crude protein and energy, or TDN, requirements for cattle based on stage of production. So mid-gestation, late gestation, and lactation. So it's kind of a simplified way of looking at this, but they're easy numbers to keep in mind. And so I like to throw these up there. And like I said, I think of them, I just remember 7, 9, 11, 50, 55, 60. And so if you look at the book values for something like wheat straw, and then I have dried distiller's grain down there as well, for crude protein and energy, because those are the two main nutrients that we are thinking about trying to meet in our ration. And so the problem with wheat straw is that it gets so low with protein and energy, below even what those mid-gestation cows are going to need, that you're probably going to have to feed quite a bit of dried distillers to make that work on its own, just those two. But in a situation where we've got maybe some other grass hay that would have higher protein and energy values than what that wheat straw would have, it's certainly not going to have what's in that dried distiller's grain. but it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And that can allow us a little more flexibility to balance this thing out, and maybe be a little more reasonable in terms of our feed cost. And so that's really the recommendation, is that we can think about how we do that, to maybe put some of that wheat straw in there just to get them kind of filled up, right? And make that hay that's going to have more nutrients go a little bit further. The other thing I'll point out here is thinking about just thinking about the hay that we have available. Most of us are going to have probably multiple lots of hay, meaning that we cut hay from different pastures on different days and that kind of thing. And so if we can get all of that hay tested, now we have an opportunity to figure out, match that hay to the right cow at the right time. And so we can, the saying I always say is, we need to feed the right hay to the right cow at the right time with the right supplement. And that's the secret to making a feeding program. And I know that's easier said than done some days. But again, being able to figure out, because you can see that when that cow becomes a lactating cow, she's supporting that calf. And then, oh, by the way, in a few months, we're going to ask her to get rebred again, right? And so she's going to have a higher protein and energy requirement than that mid-gestation cow. And so if we can save our better hay for those animals when they need it the most, that's going to help our program be more efficient, and our rations become more efficient, because the gap that you're trying to fill with that supplement, and that supplement, feed costs being somewhere maybe around 300 pounds a ton, that gap is smaller if we can provide more of that protein and energy from the forage. Just running some basic numbers with the two of these, it gets really hard to meet those requirements as we get later into the winter. We think about that lactating cow. The other thing is I just kind of run some of these numbers just to look at what a ration balancer would tell us. I'm not factoring in things like mud and wind and temperature, and as a nutritionist, our ration balancing software can account for some of those things, but it's all based off of some equations, and I find that they tend to overcorrect for those factors. But we can't just, so I leave them out, because when I'm calculating a ration, it tends to overcorrect them. But in the real world, we can't just ignore those things. And so just those two things alone, it's going to be awfully hard, I think, to maintain body condition score on those cows throughout the winter, especially as you move into those spring calving cows that are going to have their calf maybe in February or so. But again, can we use it to extend the hay that we have and maybe feed it to some of those cows when their energy and protein requirements are lower? Absolutely. But the biggest thing, if Dr. Limcooler or Kevin or I are doing a ration for somebody, I think we'll all agree that those are numbers on a sheet of paper. But what's going to be most important is that we keep an eye on those cows. And if they start to slip into a lower body condition score, we need to make a correction pretty quickly, because once they hit that body condition score 4, Dr. Anderson will tell you that they have a much more difficult time getting bred back. And so we certainly don't want to have that issue occurring. So hopefully that kind of gives you a good place. If you have other forages and we get those tested, we can get some more, definitive, answers. But just in general, that's kind of my approach to thinking about meeting those requirements.
Katie, can I jump in here right here?
Yep.
Another thing we found with wheat straw over some of the droughts in the past is palatability. And cattle like wheat hay, but they don't necessarily, cozy up to wheat straw in a lot of cases. So if you can use some of the wet products, obviously if you've got access to some kind of tub grinder or mixer wagon that can mix some of the wet products and stick that distillers to the straw, you'll help on palatability and intake. Again, sharpen your pencil, make sure you got the right kind of ration, everything that Katie was talking about. Another thing is, we're talking about testing hay. I put the put in the chat box, we've got a pretty neat little app called the UK Beef Cow Forage Supplement Tool. It's not a complete ration balancer, but it'll sure get you, maybe to third base, so to speak, if you want to use that analogy, and get you to where, you can at least plug these numbers in. If you can't remember the 7, 9, 11 and the 50, 55, 60, you can plug it into the supplement tool, and it'll actually give you how many pounds of soy hulls or gluten or distillers or whatever that you can add to a pre-choice hay ration. Now, if you're going to get complex rations where we're going to mix wheat straw with some hay, with some wet distillers, and somewhat of a TMR or total mix ration, really, get in touch with your county agents or get in touch with us, and we'll help you with a ration. We'll run that through an actual ration balancer. But if you Google that UK Beef Cow Forage Supplement Tool, you can download that and save it onto your phone. And when you get your hay test back, you can at least plug those numbers in and say, hey, see, do I have a problem? Is it time to go ahead and start supplementing? And kind of go from there. The last thing quickly is, Katie touched on it. She said, if you see those cows backsliding, sometimes we get barn blind. I guess in this case, it'd be field blind, but you're feeding cattle over periods of days. Use that smartphone. I mean, we all have that phone with a camera on it. Take some pictures at the beginning of your winter feeding, and 30 days later, take some more pictures. And if you've got some colored cattle as opposed to all black cattle, it's even better. Take some pictures of those colored cattle, because you can see definition better on those colored cattle, white and red cattle. And use that phone and with that timestamp on your phone to see, are these cattle maintaining, are they backsliding, so you can monitor that body condition score. You may have to adjust your feeding program. So that's all.
And I'll add just one more thing to the forage supplement tool. I have a Beef Minutes video that is available on YouTube or on the UK Animal Sciences website. If you go to our beef section, you'll see a link for Beef Minutes. There is a Beef Minutes video out there, and I apologize, I didn't look it up earlier, and so I don't know exactly what number it is, but it touches on the use of the UK Forage Supplement Tool, and I actually walked through how to calculate prices, because that tool will give you how many pounds of soy hulls or how many pounds of dried distillers or gluten or some mixture thereof. It's got a bunch of different options, but I walked through actually pricing some of those things out so you can get it down to the cost per head per day to supplement that particular feed stuff as well. So that's something we're working on, I think, to try to get it integrated into that existing tool. That way you could just put in feed costs and get some of that information. But for now, I at least have given you the resources to be able to do that math and calculation if you haven't done that before.
All right, excellent. Well, we've kind of blown through our hour. I'm not seeing any additional questions come up from you guys, so I'm gonna give you one last chance to type something in real quick, but I wanted to put up the screen again of what's going on next month, and this kind of segues in well with what Katie and Kevin were just talking about, and we've got one of the actually specialists from down at the University of Tennessee that's going to share with us, Dr. Katie Mason, and she's going to talk about this very topic, and that's from hay sample to feed bunk, winter feeding considerations for cattle. So if you want to get a much more in-depth information about some of your options for feeding this winter, next month is definitely the UK webinar series to attend. For those of you that need CAPE credits, talk to your county agent, but the code, if it's allowed within your county to use these as your educational, CAPE educational the requirement, the code for that is the UK beef that goes in the signature section for the speaker, but talk to your county agent about whether that's accepted in your county, and they can help you with that process. Any last comments by any of the specialists tonight that's come to you?
Let me
Yes.
invite everyone to our Kentucky Grazing Conference, October 26th in Litchfield at the Extension Office, and October 27th in Clark County. But some great speakers with Les Anderson's one of them, and Jim Garish is coming in from Ohio, Idaho, and Ray Archuleta talking about soils and taking care of your soils, and several other ones. So go to that KY Forages website under events, and you can sign up for that Kentucky Grazing Conference.
Excellent. And I say that you've put that, yep, you put that link in the chat, and Dr. Van Valen put up about Beef Bash, which is October 20th down at Princeton. We are going, proceeding ahead with that, even under the trials and tribulations that Katie, that you guys have had down there. We're gonna still put on Beef Bash this year, and we're gonna make the most of it. So come join us for that as well. All right, and also, Katie, I would point out real quick that that I send out regularly the link to the videos for the beef group, and so if folks check your old emails, you definitely should have that link. Did I hear somebody trying to comment?
Yeah, Dr. Bullock, this is Linda McClanahan. I was just wanting to mention real quick about the Kentucky Beef Conference. It's on Monday night it starts at 5:30 at the Fayette County Extension Office, but we also have the Zoom option. So the actual program will start at 6:30. And folks can contact their county agent to get the registration if they want to do Zoom or in person. It's $10 registration fee in person. We are going to have Cattle Facts be one of our featured speakers. Dr. Arnold and Dr. Lim Cooler will both also be on the program. So we're really excited about that and trying to be able to maintain our audience that we've expanded over the last couple years across the state. So that's on Monday night, October the 17th at either Fayette County Extension Office or Zoom.
Okay, that's next Monday, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, lots of exciting things coming up. We'll keep you guys busy and getting educated over the next month with all these programs going on. So we do appreciate you joining tonight. Please stay tuned and look for the information on the upcoming webinars. We'll get the more extended out into the winter program out to you guys here fairly shortly as well. And tonight's session will be available on video. I'll get that link out as soon as we have it. Again, thanks everybody for joining us. Everybody, please have a pleasant and safe fall, and we'll catch you in November. Good night.
Good night.